All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our June membership check-in. I hope you're doing well. I hope that life is good and the easy is living, or the living is easy. Isn't that I don't know what that's from, but it sounds familiar. Um, I hope you're having a great June. It's beautiful weather here in Lansing. It's a little chilly, I will say, this morning, but I'm okay with it because it's been kind of a little hot the last few days. But welcome to our June 2023 MACAE membership check-in. We are going on now. This will be 3 years since we launched our MACAE monthly check-in. So I appreciate you attending. We are recording today's session, and all the links and all the materials will be made available to you. And we've got a lot of great updates for you. And just appreciate you taking the time this morning as you come on in. So I thought we might just start before we launch into some advocacy updates with our friend Matt Gillard from Michigan's Children. We always want to welcome everyone and share any good news or updates that you might have going on in your programs. So I would invite you, if you have any news that you'd like to share, put in the chat, or you can unmute and share those. This is a great time just for you to share out what's happening in your program. There are a lot of graduations going on, a lot of year-end celebrations, a lot of new programs launching for the summer. Share away if you would like to. Does anyone have anything that they would like to share with us this morning?
Hey, Patrick, it's Joy from Royal Oak. I got a new baby.
Oh, very nice, Joy. Good morning.
One of my teachers yesterday, Mimic Insurance, came and awarded them an award of $500 for after school enrichment activities. So
Wonderful.
she submitted some student work. She was teaching digital literacy and they worked on some kind of art, and she submitted it and Mimic gave her an award. So we're really proud of her.
That is wonderful. Congratulations. What is her name?
Daria, Darya Owens. She's a
Great.
doctor.
Congratulations to Daria.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any good news to share? Mandy was sharing that graduation is at the beach June 13th for their adult education program down in Cass, Van Buren counties. Great. Anyone else have anything good news they'd like to share?
Patrick, it's Bonnie. I'll
Hi,
share
Bonnie.
that Marisol Alderman, who is serving as the COE Fellow this year, went to Washington a couple weeks ago and spoke on a congressional panel in regards to adult education. And what's really special about Marisol is the fact that she was a student in our program, became a mentor, and now she's our intake and assessment coordinator. So being able to speak firsthand from an adult ed perspective.
Thank you for sharing that, Bonnie. I'm so glad that you shared that, and it's wonderful. Just a regular Tuesday for Marisol, right? Going down to Washington and being such a great advocate, and she'll be working over the next year with us to help our statewide advocacy and as part of her fellowship. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for having the vision to share Marisol with a larger audience, because she's so talented and has such a powerful voice. Thank you for sharing that, Bonnie, and congrats to Marisol. Any other updates? Mike Myers, I see you put something in the chat. Do you want to add anything to that? Looks like they're doing
we're gonna do an ESL end of the year party festival tomorrow, or Friday, I should say. Today's only Wednesday, so we're gonna do that Friday. We're gonna have a little party and do some grill out and tacos, have some good stuff for the ESL students to participate in. So should be a good time for all.
Wonderful. Congratulations. Thank you, Mike. And it looks like a bunch of graduation ceremonies. Detroit Public Schools Community District Adult Education graduation is tomorrow. So kudos and good luck to you, Dakia, and your team and everybody there and your students and learners. Looks like Kalamazoo has their graduation on June 12th at the historic Chinnery Auditorium there where their program is. So Robin, we wish you all well with that. And Heather put in the chat that Sparta has over 40 graduates in the month of May alone. And they've got 103 co-graduates right now and had their great graduation last week. So wonderful news. Any other news to share?
I'm gonna say, since everybody's throwing out graduations for Academy West, we did ours. We had 46 total graduates this year, 11 GED completers, and 35 diploma. We also had 10 students. Four of them were graduates, but we had 10 students total who completed CTE credential programs through our partnership with the ISD with special programs. We did a big luncheon. We had four graduates. We just recently, last Thursday, had our graduation at the high school. Went really well. Most excited crowd and students I've seen ever. I don't think they stopped cheering the entire time. So it's really good to see that, and just it was a really successful year. Sounds like everybody's had successful years.
Thank you, Chad, for sharing that. And Michelle shared that they had 24 high school diploma graduates and 13 GED graduates at the Sturgis, Three Rivers, and Centerville Consortium graduation last week. And I had the distinct honor of speaking at their graduation. I want to thank Michelle for that invitation. And it was every time I go, no matter how many times you go to a graduation, it's, you're left with some tears because of the powerful impact of our programs and the stories, and just seeing, like you were iterating, Chad, the family support and the community, and they're so proud of those graduates that they should be. And Jan was sharing they have 50 grads this year. 3 were dual enrolled students at the ESL, and they have graduation tonight. So great job. Good luck, Jan. And Allegan has their graduation on Thursday, and they have 72 graduates from Melissa. So congratulations to you all. All right. Well, thank you. I always like to start out with that. It shows a positive impact of the work that we do and the really cool and amazing things. And Heidi put that they have 48 graduate in Houghton Lake on Saturday. So post those on Facebook. We do share those out, and we also try to keep a record too. If you are not on Facebook or social media, you can send me an email with some of that information too. So I would like to shift gears a little bit. A lot is happening in our state over the last few weeks. It's a very busy spring coming into the summer. And if you have been watching what I would say is the soap opera of the state budget process, it's pretty fascinating. There's a lot happening, a lot of conversations happening, and I'm glad that we have Matt Gillard, our friend and colleague from Michigan's Children, who is going to kind of just give us an update of where things are at in the state budget process. And I want to welcome Matt, and he'll kind of talk a little bit about where some of the priority investments that we champion, where they're kind of at, and kind of where the entire process sits at. So I'll turn it over to you, Matt, if you're available.
I am, Patrick, as available as I can be at 9:10 in the morning here on Wednesday. But thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us. So yeah, I will. I'll update folks quickly, kind of on where we are, but really answer any questions people have as well. So we are right in the heat of the moment here, the heart of things as far as the state budget goes, right in the final home stretch. And so if you remember, this process kind of started way back in February with the governor presenting her budget proposal to the legislature, as is typical, and then the legislature working off of that proposal, and ultimately the House and Senate each passing their own versions of the state budget. And remember, what we're talking about is what we call the fiscal year 24 state budget, which will actually go into effect on October 1st of this year, which is the fiscal year for the state, runs October 1 through the end of September. And obviously the big difference in this whole process this year, or the big difference politically in the Michigan this year, is that the Democrats, for the first time in over 40 years, have complete control of our state government, meaning they're the majority party in both the House and the Senate. And then, you combine that with the fact that they're, at the beginning of this process, at least, the state really had unprecedented levels of resources available to them in increased revenues and money available to spend. So this is a huge opportunity. It remains a huge opportunity for the governor and the legislature to really direct, state spending into the future and to really prioritize some areas. So if you remember, we saw some good things in terms of MACAE and MACAE's priorities in the governor's budget proposal. Certainly, we've continued to monitor that, to work closely with Patrick at Michigan's Children and with other advocates to make sure that as budgets move through the House and the Senate, those priorities were maintained. But, you know, there's been some changes, obviously, as we go through the process. So the way the process is going to work, or works now, is, like I said, the Senate passed their version of the budget bills. The House passed their version of the budget bills independently. Those then get, you know, the Senate bills go over to the House. They do what's called a non-concur vote, where they, you know, vote down essentially the Senate version. The House version goes to the Senate. The Senate does the same thing, votes down the House version, and that ultimately puts these bills into what's called conference committees. And then the conference committees, the idea of the conference committees, the goal of the conference committees is to work out the differences between the, excuse me, between the House and the Senate versions of the bill, and ultimately get to a budget bills that both the House and the Senate can pass in the same form, that then are presented to the governor for the governor's signature or veto. There was, you know, a lot of discussion early on in this process that because the Democrats had control, that this was going to move real quickly and they were going to get this done even in May and move right on. And there were some efforts to do that. And there was even some talks about doing some significant supplemental budget bills back in April to get some of these things, the priorities that have been identified by the governor and the legislature in place, especially around the school aid side, in place to be able to kick in at the beginning of the next school year, even, you know, before October 1. Some of those things hit some roadblocks and things have slowed down a little bit. And I think, you know, in the best interest of probably good government in the legislature, they've kind of slowed down on this process a little bit. Then there was a late push even by the governor's office to try to get the legislature to get us all wrapped up before everybody went up to Mackinac Island last week for their big shindig on the island with all the fancy folks. And they wanted to get the budget done before then, but they slowed down on that as well, which I think was a good idea. And so at any rate, we're here now. The expectation, and there's no reason this won't happen, and I'm fully expect this to happen, is that this process will wrap up this month in June. So by the end of June, the House and the Senate will agree on final budget versions, final budget bills, and present them to the governor. And so the negotiations between the differences really in the House and the Senate versions and the governor's original proposal are really beginning in earnest right now. And, you know, we saw some differences. Patrick can highlight maybe more of the specifics of the differences as a result relates to community and adult ed in the versions. But in general, I mean, we're in a pretty good spot, I think, from your issue area. You know, we've seen prioritization and support for further investments into these areas from all three legs of the stool, the three-legged stool here that we deal with. You know, it seems as though the governor's version is still the preference, with potentially some added components that we saw specifically in the House version of the Leo budget. And so right now, one other process kind of point is right now these budgets are still separated out, where they're each individual department or the school aid fund itself has its own individual budget bill. What's become typically the process for the last several years is after the differences are negotiated out, all the bills are combined into one or two big omnibus budget bills and passed as one or two big omnibus budget bills, where all of these individual bills are combined together. They still haven't determined if that's what the direction they're going to go this year, with the Democrats being in the majority, but I would expect they would. But the conference committee process is really starting in earnest right now. And that's where we're at, where the differences between the chamber's legislation is being worked out. And so this is really a critical time from an advocacy perspective. And the way so the conferees have just been named, or for most of the budgets have just been named. The Senate conferees for a lot of the budgets were named back even before Memorial Day. The House has just started naming their conferees this week. Yesterday named a bunch of them. And it's coming in as it normally does. So normally the way the conferees work is it's the chair of the appropriations subcommittee, the minority vice chair. So the way the conference committees are set up, sorry, I'll back up a step, is there's 6 members on a conference committee, 3 from the Senate, 3 from the House. 2 from the majority party in each chamber and 1 from the minority party. So there'll be 2 Senate Dems, 1 Senate Republican, 2 House Dems, and 1 House Republican on each conference committee. Typically, those are the chairs and vice chairs of the subcommittees that have heard the budget and that have worked on the budget. Sometimes there's some minor changes in that if there's reasons to do so within the caucus, but those are typically the 6 conferees that are named for each of these conference committees. And so the majority party still controls the conference committees. And so really the real negotiation here, the majority of the negotiation is going to be between the Senate Dems and the House Dems on working out the differences in these budgets. Most of these budgets moved along party lines where we did not see Republican support very much at all for most of the budgets as they moved in both of the House and the Senate. This is not untypical. When the Republicans were in control, the Democrats rarely voted for the budgets, certainly as they were moving out of, at least at the beginning of the process. Now, where this gets a little tricky, so a couple of points here to make from an advocacy perspective. So even though there's these relatively few people on these conference committees, those people that are on the conference committee are really representing their caucus and their colleagues that aren't on the conference committee in those negotiations. So if your individual representative or senator is not on one of these conference committees, that doesn't mean they don't have any say in this process. They absolutely do. And they're going to be going, their job is now to go to those conference committee members and say, hey, I need to make sure this is in the final version of the budget that comes out. And I need to make sure that, that the adult ed line item is reflective of this when this budget comes out. And so this is really a critical advocacy time, particularly for the Democrats, but I'll get to a minute and why the Republicans still have some play in this as well. But particularly within these Democratic caucuses where these differences are going to be worked out in these budget versions, right now is when a lot of these discussions are starting and these decisions are going to be made here in the next couple of weeks as far as how these are going to be worked out. A couple of big picture points, and then I want to get into where the Republicans play into this and some of the nuances that are a little bit different and screwy this year. So there's been a lot of talk about revenues. So what the way this works is we have a January revenue estimating conference where all these economists and really smart people get in a room and decide how much money the state's going to have to spend for the next fiscal year. The governor uses that number, those numbers, to present her budget proposal. Then we do another revenue estimating conference in May, which is an update basically. And they say, all right, are we still on track? Where are we for revenues? And then the legislature uses those numbers, the newer ones that come out in May, for their final version of the budget that then is presented to the governor. As predicted, the revenues in May were down somewhat from what we had projected back in January. So that revenues were down, but people expected this, and this wasn't unanticipated. So the versions of the budget that the legislature passed already, moving to this point, reflect those lower numbers. So there's no real reason to be, for major concern here that we have to dramatically cut budgets from where they've been moving through the process based on the May revenue estimating conference. Even though the May revenues were down somewhat, that was kind of anticipated, and the legislature anticipated that and had already calculated into that in that equation essentially, so that the budgets they passed are still within the revenues that are available. So there's no real need to be thinking we need to have significant cuts here from this point forward as to what has already been proposed or what is already out there. So that's a good thing. So right now the differences are being worked out, and this is a critical time from an advocacy perspective to let your legislators know what your priorities are and what you think they should be focusing on. Like I said, particularly the Democrats, whether or not they're on these conference committees that are ultimately going to meet and hash out these budget processes. And the other thing is the governor's office is obviously not represented on the conference committees, but the governor's office is a key part of these negotiations. These negotiations are really a three-way negotiation at this point. It's the House, the Senate, and the governor's office meeting together and working out the differences between the three versions of the budget, of each budget that are out there. And so those are the three players in this room. Now, where the Republicans weigh in on this is, like I said, to this point, most of these budgets have moved on a pretty much party line manner without Republican support. There's an opportunity for that to change, particularly in the Senate. They have a rule that requires bills in order to get immediate effect, to become effective immediately, they have to get a 2/3 vote. So that means they need to get 6 Republican senators to vote with the Democrats in order to give these budget bills immediate effect. That gives the Republicans a lot of leverage in these budget negotiations to say, all right, we'll give immediate effect to the budget bill, but I need X, Y, and Z to be included in the budget. Or I need my policy bill on some completely different item to be moved and the governor agree to support it and to sign it, or negotiate in any way that they see fit on this. Now, it would be, I would, if there are any Republican members out there, or any of you have Republican members of the legislature that really want, are supporters and champions of community and adult ed, this is something that they could easily, bring to these negotiations and say, hey, I'd be willing to support some immediate effect measures on these budgets if, or even I would just, as a House Republican member, I would be willing to support this budget if these priorities were realized in it. This is an opportunity for them to really engage in the process from that standpoint as well. These negotiations between the Senate, between the Democrats and Republicans have not been going well this year. There's been a lot of acrimony based on a lot of the policy bills that the Senate Dems have prioritized and moved. And there's a real breakdown in relationship here between Senate Dems and Senate Republicans, so much so to the point that one of the options the Democrats are considering is actually doing what's called sine die, which is the formal end of the legislative session on July 1st or before July 1st. Because what happens is any bills that don't get immediate effect, they go into effect 90 days after the end of the legislative session. So typically that's in March, right? End of March. And so what typically they end the legislative session at, the end of December. There'll be some formality they do between Christmas and New Year's where nobody has to be here, but just they formally close the legislative session. And then any bills that have passed that have not received immediate effect going into effect 90 days after that. Well, in order for the budget to go into effect October 1st, they would have to do that formal closing of the legislative session by July 1st. And then the budget bills, if they don't have immediate effect, would go into effect October 1st. So there's actually that option is on the table for Democrats. And if they are unable to come to some agreement with at least 6 Senate Republicans, that is still a real option that's could happen. Now, does that mean the legislature just goes on vacation for 6 months and doesn't have to do anything? No. What would happen if that were to take place is the governor is still able, even though the legislature is formally ended, the governor is able to call special legislative sessions around specific issue areas or specific topics to deal with things. And so there would still be these special legislative sessions called throughout the fall where the legislature would be back in town working on specific issues. The Democrats don't want to do this for a number of reasons. One, they don't want to cede control over kind of their agenda completely to the governor's office, even though they are of the same party. But also, it's just not good government in general. And so they're hoping, I think, to work something out. And there's indications now that there may be some movement towards being able to work some things out. But this all gives Republicans more of an opportunity right now to weigh in on these budgets as well, even though they're in the minority party, and to ask for some things that they want to see included in these budgets if they're willing to then support the budgets and to support the immediate effect vote on these budgets. The House doesn't have that immediate effect rule. They can just gavel through immediate effect. So that's not really as much of a factor in the House side. This is more just on the Senate side, but it's added a new dynamic and a bit of a wrinkle to the process this year. That seems to be, a factor in how these negotiations are ongoing right now. So I guess I can pause there and answer any questions. As far as the specifics on the MACAE stuff, I think we're still looking, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, for something close to what the governor had proposed on the school aid side. And then we're, hopeful to get this added piece in on the LEO, the labor and economic, I forget what LEO stands for right now, but the LEO budget that will, and that the House had in particular, which had some added opportunities for MACAE members in there. And these are both certainly still in play. And I think 2 things that certainly with some focused advocacy efforts here in the next couple of weeks, we can make sure we get to the finish line in some form that works for everybody.
Thank you, Matt, for sharing that kind of comprehensive overview. It really is kind of a little bit of a soap opera over the last few months and may continue to be, or let's hope it's not so dramatic, but
And it's early in the morning for that much gobbledygook to come at you, so I understand. But if anybody has any questions about any of this, or any even questions about your individual legislators and how they may play into this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of us here at Michigan's Children. We're here to help.
are there any questions for Matt that we have? Either you can put them in the chat or you can unmute and ask.
Yeah, who is on these conference committees? Which six?
So, I was just looking.
Your Nancy was just named, Matt, Nancy DeBoer.
To the school aid one,
The
yeah.
school aid, yep.
Yeah,
So,
the House just named their members yesterday. The Senate had named a bunch of theirs earlier. Yeah, Nancy DeBoer is on the school aid conference committee. Regina Weiss and Jason Morgan are the other two House members on school aid. And then the senators are Camilleri, Pulahanky, and Bumstead, I believe. So those are the 6 conferees on the school aid budget conference committee. I don't know that Leo's been named yet. Will certainly be on the Leo. Will Snyder will be on the Leo conference committee from the House side.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Nancy and Bumstead's from Muskegon, and Nancy was a former mayor of Holland.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
So though, yeah, they're both good key players in there, and they both, like I said, you know, as Republicans, they have an opportunity, and this is an easy one, right? I mean, this isn't something they, you know, I mean, if they go into these negotiations saying, well, I'll give you immediate effect if you eliminate the income tax, right, or something. I mean, obviously that's a non-starter, but these are things that they can go in and say, hey, man, I really want the adult ed piece to look like this. The Democrats will be happy with that too. I mean, these are things that they can get agreement on. And then, I mean, it behooves everybody to have these budgets come on. There's going to be good stuff in these budgets. There's going to be stuff in these budgets that Republicans want to vote for. And so this, you know, there's opportunity here to work this out.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Mike, for that question. Any other questions? All right. If you do have, you can certainly put them in the chat and we'll get them to Matt. I know Matt has to leave for some other meetings, but I also wanted to share that Michigan's Children does have a podcast called Speaking for Kids. And on their most recent podcast, they go very in depth. If you're interested in the budget process and politics, it's a little house of cardsy, if you will. You can learn more about the state budget process and listen to that. And we've included the link there, and Dawn's put the link into the chat as well for you if you'd like to listen to that. But I want to thank Matt and his leadership at Michigan's Children and support and help of MACAE over the last, well, really two decades really of Michigan's Children and MACAE working together, but especially over the last few months as we've worked through this kind of very significant, one of the most significant budget years processes that we have been involved in recent history. So thank you, Matt, for your all help and your expertise this morning as well.
Thank you, Patrick. And you know where to find me. I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
We will. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys. Bye-bye.
Good things, all good things. So thank you all for being a part of that. And it's kind of an end note to that. We will be kind of sending out a recap as well as I will be reaching out to some of the specific programs that do have conferees to those legislative committees. I had already reached out to the Senate. The House was released yesterday. And so Mike and others who have conferees on those committees, I'll be sending an email to you as well today, just as a highlight. Shifting gears a little bit, I would like to welcome our new board members to the MACAE board. Thank you to all those who participated in the nomination process of nominating your friends or colleagues for our MACAE board, as well as those that ran in the election and said yes, And we're happy to announce those that are reelected and new additions to our board. So Whitney, as well as Bill Henry, Chad Zitterkoff, excuse me, Chad, your last name I need to fix, but Michael Evans and Renee Gowan were all reelected in their capacities to the MACAE board. Renee shifted to be the regional representative for Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb counties. So we would like to congratulate them as they continue their stellar work on our board. We'd also like to welcome and introduce Heather Holland, who will be joining our MACAE board. She will be the networking chairperson. And so I'm very happy that Heather will be coming on and will be working very closely to provide new opportunities to new members, as well as networking opportunities, both in person as well as virtually for all of you as members of the association. We're excited to share that we've created a new position in data information sharing, and that data information chair will be Joel Render. He will really help to look at different data sources that serve all of the populations of our association, analyzing them, sharing those resources out with the field. Also, just really informing what we do as an association as it relates to our advocacy work, and really best practices, and really trying to get some great data in a variety of different ways for our members and for a lot of the initiatives that we're part of. So thank you, Joel, for taking those additional responsibilities on as we explore what that position will be. And I know Joel is the perfect person to do that. And then we're excited that Ted Kroll will be our new advocacy and government relations chairperson. Ted's really excited about this. He has both an adult and alternative perspective. He worked in the K-12 system for a very long time, so he understands the multifacets of the different dynamics of adult alternative community education. And so I'm very happy that he'll be taking that leadership and helping us move that forward and take that into a wonderful direction, as we learn today and continue to know is that our advocacy initiatives are so important on a statewide perspective. So congratulations to everyone, and welcome to the new faces that will be on the board. There'll be lots of opportunities for you to be engaged with your regional representatives or with your board members. And certainly if your region is not represented here, it's because that position was not up for re-election this year. So with that, there are a couple of faces that you may be familiar with that I would like to acknowledge and to celebrate for their leadership as new people come onto the board. We've had some wonderful people that have served a very long time on the board that are stepping back and aside to pursue other additional opportunities or focus on programming within their home districts. And I would be remiss, he's not here, and I don't have him here because he's not quite leaving us, but he is retiring. Oogie Lamar has been our advocacy chairperson for many years and has been involved in the board. And we will do a big celebratory thing at the fall conference for Oogie. He's working through the end of December, but he is a June 30th stepping aside from the board and from his advocacy responsibilities as he looks to retirement. And so if you see Oogie, congratulate him on that. But he'll still be working very closely with us. And so we will celebrate him in due time and due process over the next few months as it gets closer to his actual retirement date. But two individuals I just wanted to thank for their service is Heather Robidoux, who has served as our networking chairperson. Heather has been very critical in helping us to do all of our virtual learning components over the last few years. She is the tech guru person and has explored those options with me and working with our conference committee when we did 2 fall conferences virtually. We have done now 3 virtual spring institutes, as well as our monthly webinars. If you remember back in the pandemic days, she hosted several networking opportunities virtually as well, and really planned a lot of dynamic new things, as well as helping us to welcome and reach out to new partners and build new relationships with new members. And so I just want to thank Heather for multiple years. I believe she started in 2019 or 2018, and so has been on the board now for several years and is going to be focusing on her young kiddos as well as her expanded work opportunities. She's basically runs the Hillsdale ISD at this point. So thank you, Heather, for all you've done. We've you've been such a great colleague, but an even better friend. So appreciate Heather so much. And then Shelley Hansen, many of you know, she's our alternative education chair. She started on the board in 2018, the same time that I did when I came to MACAE. So we kind of worked so well together in a couple of different things. And she was our professional development chair for a year before taking on the responsibilities of an at-large and serving as our alternative education chair. And Shelley is going to be stepping back to really focus on the additional responsibilities that she has within her school district, sort of being the superintendent. Shelley is the superintendent of her district and runs all of the community adult alternative ed programming. She does stuff with the website. She does facilities. She does teacher things. She does professional development. She does everything within her wonderful school district. So I just want to thank these two individuals. Being a part of the board is an awesome opportunity, but it can also be it's a volunteer position. And so you have to really be passionate and dedicated and put your heart and soul into it. And these are two really fine examples of two wonderful people that have done that and made MACAE better, made the state better, and made our programming and what we do, our association better. So if you wouldn't mind, just say thank you in the chat. If Heather and Shelley are here, I just want to thank them for their leadership and for their volunteerism over the last few years. And we're excited as we move into the future, knowing that they were a part of MACAE and will continue to be, and that we have new leaders that are stepping forward as well to continue to carry the baton forward. Shifting gears, a little bit of an update on community education and before and after school programming. We do have a community survey that we would ask you to please share or complete if you have a community education programming within your agency or your school district. We would ask you to please complete that survey. It was released in early May, and so we're still looking to have feedback for that. But I'd also ask you to send it to, if you're especially within a school district, if you have a community education program, before and after school enrichment program within your district or agency, and they're not members of MACAE, please send that to them. We're trying to really kind of graph out the landscape of where are programs happening, what do they look like, what resources might they use, and how can MACAE be an asset to them. So please check the chat for that. We will also email out the recording with all the links as well, but please take some time to complete that survey or to share that out. That will help our community education committee as we go forward over the next year to really plan better programming, professional development, partnership connections, and connectivity. So would encourage you and ask you to please take a moment to do that. In kind of K-12, alternative education and youth populations news, One Detroit, which is a combination of several different talent agencies within the city, released a video listening panel on Gen Z in the workforce. I was taking a listen to it yesterday for a little bit. It's really fascinating. They talk to Gen Zers, they talk to employers, and it's just kind of something food for thought to have on in the background as you may be working over the next few weeks or even this summer to really think about that population and the opportunities that they have, how they've grown up over the last 3 to 4 years within the COVID experience and what that means for them as they enter into the workforce and what they look for as viable options for employment and what those expectations are that they have. Just really important that I think we're aware of that and are thinking about those things. A reminder really is that administrator and teacher and school counselor certifications are typically renewed at the end of a academic year, which is June 30th. And so please check to be sure that you are current on your professional learning hours. There's different levels of renewal for different certificates, so I won't go into the specific details of all those, but this is the time of year where occasionally at the office, we will get some frantic emails or phone calls about, I need to get 50 hours of professional learning between now and June 30th. And so please just check that for your personal self and make sure that everything's up to date, that you have all the professional development that you need. And even if you are not renewing this year, really think about, okay, so for the next year, maybe I have to renew next year. And what are the resources that I need to have or the professional learning that I need to participate in? And certainly MACAE as a part of your membership includes a lot of those components as a part of that for free. So be looking for those details on your own personal profile within your educator licensure and certificate portal. Just a reminder too, that the Alternative Education and Innovative Programs waiver, so if you're seeking days and hours waiver for next school year 23-24, is due by June 15th. So you want to make sure that you have that in. If you have questions, certainly that's next week. So you'd want to ask those questions and get those resolved before you turn in that application. So please make sure that you're aware of that and are being responsive to that if you haven't done that already. And then the last piece is just a really interesting opinion piece from a former Michigan Department of Education superintendent, as well as former interim and assistant superintendent of schools for the state, really on the future of K-12 investments. It's a good, interesting read. It's pretty easy to read and follow along, but as Matt was alluding to, there's lots of differing opinions about where should investments go and what are the best investments, not only related to K-12, but all investments in the state. But this one in particular is interesting about where you actually have educational school leaders that have come up through the education system and have said, we need to maybe start thinking about funding differently and doing things a little bit differently. So if you're interested in those kinds of articles, please take a read of that. It was very fascinating. In terms of adult education and IET, integrated education and training, a couple of resources for you. One to note is that the prices for GED testing are increasing. So if you have a learner who is going to be taking a test, you need to understand that that is going to be slightly increased. We've included the link here for you for that. It's while it's not increasing significantly in terms of, I think it's per test is a few dollars. We know that for many of our learners, that could be very significant. So it is important that you are aware of that, if you're a testing center, that you're aware of that. If you have students who are going to be going to testing and have to pay for those things, you're fully aware that those are going to be effective on July 1st, and that you or your team understand that and are aware of that as well. Something else I wanted to share with you is that if you recall, MACAE several years ago entered into negotiations with CASAS, which is the adult education testing apparatus. One of the testing apparatus that is approved in the state of Michigan. CASAS and TABE are the two approved. We entered into negotiations to create a statewide testing price that you as MACAE members have access to and should be taking access to and really kind of taking advantage of if you administer e-CASAS or the virtual testing. We are renewing and renegotiating those new prices. In fact, the CASAS conference is next week, so we're having some final conversations on that. And we expect to have that information by the end of June to share out with you, so that in your budgets, as well as in your programming and planning, you will have an updated information. I do anticipate that the WTU, so the individual price per testing unit, when we initially negotiated that, we negotiated it based on a large program's quantity being a smaller cost. And so that saved a lot of our smaller programs, the individual costs. I do anticipate that our per unit price will be increasing slightly, probably between 5 and 10 cents per testing unit. So I know that for some of our larger programs that may have an impact, even some of our smaller programs, but we're working very diligently to try to get that down, and we will send that information out, as well as the information on how to access it, who to contact, what to reference when you're working with CASAS to do that. And if you haven't thought about doing this is not a sales pitch, but I'm just saying, if you haven't thought about doing virtual testing for CASAS or TABE, this is an opportunity to really look at that and look at your program and what you may need to be able to do that. So more information on that will be coming up soon. A reminder that also June 26th, is when the WIOA narratives updates are due in Nexus for the 23-24 program year. So please make sure that you observe that deadline. And as a reminder, you need your level 5 to initiate the grant, as well as finalize and upload the grant. So we're coming into the time of the year where our level 5s are very busy, just as we all are. And we have to give them that space to do those things, as well as maybe the gentle, subtle, and not so subtle reminders that this information is due. So please just have that awareness and communicate within your agency of who needs to be doing what in order to make sure that all of your information is uploaded by 11:59 p.m. on June 26th for the WIOA narratives upload into the Nexus system. So, and allowing space and time for Nexus to give you issues, I would say. And then lastly, I wanted to also update you that we are working, we actually have a meeting this afternoon with the State Adult Education Office to try to create greater clarity around verbiage that you put into your individual grants, specifically adult education grants for MACAE services, whether that's membership or professional development. And our intent is to then really have that sent out to all of you verbatim that you can copy and paste into your narratives or into your budgets, excuse me, for this next program year, both for your WIOA and or for your Section 107. And we're trying to be very diligent about streamlining that process and not having questions come up about MACAE membership costs, or having the detail that you need at the local level to not have to kind of make changes and have to make modifications or amendments, particularly around the MACAE things in your budget. So we will be sending that information out very soon as well, once we have that meeting and get those details finalized. Are there any questions about any of the community ed updates, alternative ed updates, or adult education updates that folks have before we move on?
Yeah, Patrick, just a comment. It's Mike.
Yeah. Hi, Mike.
You know, it's sad that you even have to have a meeting to do that sort of thing. Everybody's capable of writing stuff in there. It's just that we constantly get hassled by the department about that verbiage, which is totally ridiculous when it's supposed to be in the hands of the regions who decide how to spend the money and what to do with it. You know, everyone who writes those grants is, you know, they speak and write and just fine. So just a comment for what it's worth.
I really appreciate that, Mike. And
yeah, we constantly get harassed by the department. It's a waste of time. They're much bigger fish to fry that they should be considering than worrying about, you know, who dotted an I and who didn't cross a T. I mean, literally, that's what they do.
I agree. And I thank you for that, Mike, because that has been my frustration, but also my motivation to try to exhaust every possible ounce of sanity that I have without going insane.
Yeah, and you can quote me on any of that or all of it.
I appreciate your humor and also your perspective on those things, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, we're coming to closer to the end of our time. Just a few updates, reminders for you really is one, we have a webinar this afternoon. There's still a couple of professional learning opportunities between now and the end of June that we invite you to take advantage of. One is a webinar on universal design learning for adult learners, which is something I know that is very important depending on if you're in a school district or even a nonprofit setting. If you're interested in those sorts of things, it is free for MACAE members, it's included within your membership. We do ask that you register. Because of the timeliness of making sure you get the information, I would just encourage you to email Dawn directly at the MACAE office at gmail.com if you're interested in registering and getting that link. It is today at 3 p.m. to 4:15 p.m. And it will also be recorded in the event that you cannot attend live. So if you're interested in that and sketches are also available. So if that's something that you're interested in or your team is interested in, please reach out to Dawn and send her a quick email so that she can make sure that you get the Zoom link for today. and take advantage of that awesome opportunity. And then the other, we sent out information. We have an in-person leadership professional development year end. Space is filling up quickly, so you want to make sure that you check your calendar, see if you're available. Here in Lansing, Wednesday, June 21st, we have 2 national speakers coming in on innovative practices and theory to practice and leadership, as well as diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. An awesome guy, Kevin Hoffman, talking about his story of growing up Black in a predominantly white community after the race riots in Detroit, and really looking and making recommendations and practices about how he can be sure that we are including DEB and I practices within our everyday work in our lives, and really practical tips and tools, and very down to earth, both of the presenters and speakers that we have having. There's a $50 cost. But if that is a challenge for you, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk about different options or things that we can look at. But would really encourage you to think about coming. It's a day out of the office. I know that that can be challenging sometimes, but to be among peers, and a reminder that everyone can be a leader. This isn't necessarily just open to directors. There are other staffing positions that have leadership roles within an agency. And so if these are topics that are of interest to you, I would encourage you to come and be a part of that. A reminder as well, we recently, I believe yesterday, sent out our 2023 year-end membership survey. I think there's about 30, a little less maybe, responses in that. Please take a moment to complete that if you will. We really do look at the survey and help inform our practice, both on a day-to-day basis, but we also share out some of those results with the larger board of directors that is meeting in retreat later this summer. And they really do help guide and direct our programming for the next year, the way in which we offer services, the types of services that we offer. So please, if you can, take a few moments to do that. There is not really an end date. We want to keep that open really through the retreat time, but we know that this is a really significant and important thing for us. And so we'd ask you to just take a few minutes to respond to that and give us some feedback on many of the things that we've done, that you've appreciated, things that we could do better. And we really, like I said, do use that as a tool to make changes for the betterment. And if you've got questions about that, or you don't see something asked or represented in that survey, please also reach out to us, and we'd be happy to collect that information in another way as well. We are looking for, as we close out this academic year, we are going to be publishing a kind of summer newsletter. So if you have a success story and would take a moment, please send those to us. We look for stories with a brief narrative and a photo, and they can be about any facet of your programming. If you have an awesome program that's launching in community education this summer, or you had an awesome program these last few months since our last newsletter came out in early February, please send those details to us. We'd love to share that. And it really is a chronicle of the work of all of you and the history really of our association and the impact that we have statewide. So we try to collect all of these things. If you have an alternative ed graduation story, or if you have an adult ed or IET or CTE training completer story, and they've gone on to employment and are making awesome moves, please share that out as well. So we always look forward to it. They're wonderful to capture and to read, but more importantly, to publish and share out with our supporters, our soon-to-be supporters, and other policymakers and partners as well. And then lastly, I would just, as we head into summer, please put this on your calendar and make sure that you're aware. Save the date. We're very excited for the MACAE Annual Fall Conference, which will be taking place October 15th through the 18th here in Lansing, the center of our state, and we will be celebrating the 40th anniversary of our association, which I think doesn't look a day over 20. But we are turning 40 years old this fall as a MACAE association, And so we've got lots of fun things planned to celebrate the history of MACAE, but also embracing the future. The accommodations and registration will be available very soon, probably the last week of June, if not July 1st. Accommodations will be available at the Radisson, which is being totally renovated and redone. It looks very snazzy and actually is transitioning to no longer be the Radisson. It is going to be a DoubleTree. So when you come in the fall to the conference, which I hope you will, it will be a DoubleTree. And if you've been to the Radisson, it'll look very different. So lots of changes in that venue. And then our conference will be held itself connected by the walkway from the Radisson DoubleTree to the Lansing Convention Center, where we'll be having our conference every day. So we're very excited. We hope you will join us. Please mark the date on your calendar. More details to come, keynotes, presenters, call for presentations, but we're really excited, and we're very excited to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the association with all of you. Gifts are always accepted in the form of memberships and attending the conference. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful month. Thank you. I hope over the next few weeks, you'll take some time, whether you are continuing into this field going forward or whether you're retiring. I say congratulations, but take a moment to understand the impact that you have on the communities in which you serve. We are making a great impact in all of the communities from all age levels, families, individuals, our community, our economy, the health and well-being, mental, spiritual, physical, of all of the people of the state of Michigan. And I really hope that you take stock in that impact that you have globally and even on the individual daily basis that you do to change lives. So thank you. I'm inspired by your work. We all are here at MACAE, and I wish you a great rest of your time in the month of June, and we will see you very soon at our next membership check-in. Take care. We'll stay on a few minutes if anyone's got any individual questions, but I hope you will take care, and I wish you well. Bye-bye.